Have you ever had a moment where your own family tried to tear you down?
I have.
My name is Rose, and my story starts at the worst Sunday dinner of my life. With a smug, pitying smile, my older sister stood up and proudly announced to my entire family that I was filing for bankruptcy. She wanted to see me broken. She thought she had won. What she didn't know is that I was sitting on a secret worth millions. So, while she was busy enjoying my public humiliation, I was making a different kind of plan. This is the story of how I let her destroy my reputation on a Sunday evening, only to secretly buy her absolute dream house the following Saturday morning. They say revenge is sweet, but they don't tell you it sometimes comes with a hefty price tag and the most satisfying set of house keys you'll ever hold. If you're ready for some deliciously sweet family revenge, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter. Let me know you're here. Drop your city in the comments below. I can't wait to see where you're all reading from. The leather of my steering wheel felt worn and slick under my sweating palms. Sunday drives to my parents' house in Westlake Hills used to be a welcome escape from the relentless pace of Austin's tech world. Now, they felt like a commute to my own tribunal. Every green light, every familiar turn off Bee Cave Road, brought me closer to the jury of my family and the verdict they were so desperate to deliver on my life. My company, Innovate Next, was my baby. For 5 years, I had poured every ounce of my life, my savings, and my sanity into it. We were on the cusp of something. That's what I told my family. The cusp. It was a vague, unsatisfying word that hung in the air between us, smelling of risk and potential failure. To my father, a retired oil and gas executive, the cusp was just a prettier word for a cliff's edge, especially for his youngest daughter. I pulled into the sweeping circular driveway of their limestone and stucco monolith, a house that screamed, "Old Money, Texas." My dad, Richard, was out front, meticulously trimming a rose bush as if its symmetry could bring order to the universe. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His eyes held the familiar look of paternal concern, which lately felt more like a low-grade disappointment. "Rose, you made it," he said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "Wouldn't miss it, Dad." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken, a smell so tied to my childhood it almost made me forget the knot in my stomach. My mother, Carol, enveloped me in a hug that was a little too tight, a little too long. She was the family's emotional barometer, and right now, her needle was deep in the red zone of anxiety. "You look thin, honey. Are you eating?" she asked, her hand lingering on my cheek. "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy." And then I saw her. My sister, Jessica, was perched on one of the kitchen's bar stools, looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot. Her blonde hair was perfectly blown out, her white linen dress was immaculate, and her smile was a weapon she sharpened daily. Beside her, her husband, Mark, clutched a glass of Chardonnay, a smug grin permanently affixed to his face. He was a corporate lawyer who had never taken a risk in his life and considered my entrepreneurial path a character flaw. "There she is," Jessica trilled, her voice a little too loud. "The prodigal daughter returns from the land of broken servers and dwindling venture capital." Mark chuckled into his wine. "Easy, Jess. She's trying her best." The condescension was so thick I could have sliced it with a knife. I ignored them, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Something smells good, Mom." Dinner was the usual tightrope walk. My parents asked careful, probing questions about the company. I gave them practiced, evasive answers. The truth was, I couldn't tell them anything. Not yet. So I let them worry. The real show began when my mother made the mistake of asking Jessica about their house hunt. Jessica's eyes lit up as if she'd been waiting for that exact cue all evening. "Oh my God, you guys, we found it. The one." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "It's this incredible 1940s craftsman over in Tarrytown, on Oakwood Avenue." She passed the phone around. It was a beautiful house, I had to admit it. Stone facade, a huge front porch with a swing, massive live oak trees shading the lawn. It was the epitome of old Austin charm, a quiet statement of success. It needs a little work, of course, she continued, already redesigning it in her head. We'd blow out the back wall, put in a whole chef's kitchen, a new pool, but the bones are just spectacular. We're putting our offer in on Tuesday. Mark puffed out his chest. The market's competitive, but our agent thinks we're in a very strong position. I watched Jessica as she talked, her face animated with a greedy, possessive passion. She didn't just want the house. She felt entitled to it. It was the next logical acquisition in her perfectly curated life. She glanced at me, a flicker of something, pity, superiority, in her eyes. It was a look that said, "This is what success looks like, little sister. Try to keep up." I just nodded, took a sip of my wine, and let the knot in my stomach twist a little tighter. The roast was delicious, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. As my mom brought out her famous Texas pecan pie, a temporary truce seemed to settle over the table. The rich, sweet aroma was a powerful anesthetic. My dad leaned back in his chair. Mark and Jessica were laughing at some shared memory, and for a fleeting moment, we almost felt like a normal family enjoying a Sunday dinner. The moment was a mirage. Jessica set her fork down with a delicate clink against her plate. Then, she picked up her water glass, tapping it gently with her fingernail. The light, ringing sound cut through the comfortable chatter. All eyes turned to her. "I'd like to make a little toast," she said, her voice smooth as silk. A practiced, benevolent smile spread across her lips. It was the same smile she used at charity fundraisers, the one that said, "I'm about to do something wonderful, and you should all be grateful to witness it." My dad smiled, amused. "What's the occasion, sweetie?" "Well," she began, her gaze sweeping the table before landing, with laser-like precision on me. "I think it's important that as a family, we support each other. Through thick and thin. Through the triumphs and the hardships." A cold dread began to creep up my spine. I knew her tells. The slight tilt of her head, the overly sincere tone. This was a performance. I was the subject. "I know you've been trying to protect us, Rose. Trying to be brave," she continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "And I admire that. I really do. But you don't have to carry this burden alone." My mother's brow furrowed in confusion. "Jessica, what are you talking about?" Jessica took a deep, theatrical breath, as if bracing herself to deliver tragic news. "I had lunch with Sarah Bishop on Friday. Her husband is a partner at Jackson Walker, the law firm." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the name of the prestigious firm hang in the air. "She told me, in the strictest confidence, of course, because she was so worried about you, about us." She locked her eyes on mine. The benevolent mask was gone, replaced by a look of cold, triumphant pity. "She told me that Innovate Next is filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. This week." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a living thing, a vacuum that sucked all the air and warmth from the room. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. My father's face, which had been relaxed moments before, hardened into a mask of stone-cold disappointment. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, a fool who had squandered her potential. And Mark just smirked. It was a small, barely perceptible twitch of his lips, but it was there. It was the look of a man whose low expectations of someone had just been satisfyingly met. The final twist of the knife came cloaked as generosity. "We've already talked about it," Jessica said, gesturing between herself and Mark. "And we want to help. We're prepared to offer you a personal loan. Enough to get you back on your feet, to tide you over until you figure out what's next." She said it so calmly, so reasonably, as if she were offering to pass the salt. She had just detonated a bomb in the middle of our family and was now offering me a Band-Aid for the shrapnel wounds. She hadn't just announced my failure. She had monetized it, turning it into an opportunity to display her magnanimity, to solidify her position as the successful, responsible sibling and mine as the charity case. The rage that filled me was nothing like I had ever felt. It wasn't hot and explosive. It was arctic, a silent, crystalline fury that froze my blood and clarified my thoughts. I didn't shout. I didn't defend myself. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a scene. Slowly, I placed my napkin on the table, pushed my chair back, and stood up. I looked at my sister, at the feigned concern in her eyes, and I saw her for exactly what she was. "I have to go," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I turned and walked out of the dining room, through the foyer and out the front door, leaving the wreckage of my reputation and the stunned silence of my family behind me. The drive back to my downtown apartment was a blur of red taillights and pulsing street lamps. The sound in the car was deafeningly silent, broken only by the frantic buzz of my phone on the passenger seat. I didn't need to look at it. I knew it was my parents. Their frantic energy was a palpable thing, reaching out through the city to claw at my composure. I parked in my designated spot in the garage, the screech of my tires echoing in the concrete space. Upstairs, in the sterile quiet of my minimalist condo, the city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting a landscape of success and ambition that felt like a bitter joke. My own family had just written me off as a complete failure. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mom. "Rose, please call us. We're so sorry. We love you." Sorry for what? For believing it? For the looks on their faces? Or for the fact that Jessica had aired it so cruelly? I silenced the phone and tossed it onto the granite countertop. It skittered to a stop, a dark, silent rectangle of judgment. I needed space. I needed to let the raw, ragged edges of Jessica's betrayal settle into something more solid, something I could use. I walked over to the wet bar, my movements stiff and automatic. I poured a generous 2 fingers of Balcones single malt into a heavy crystal tumbler. The smoky Texas whiskey burned on the way down, a welcome fire in the icy cavern of my chest. Glass in hand, I went to my home office. It was a sparse room, a standing desk, a powerful computer rig, a single ergonomic chair. On the desk, next to my keyboard, sat a thick, unassuming manila folder. The label, printed in stark black letters, read, "Project Titan, Confidential." I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of legal documents, dense with clauses and subclauses, but the core of it was simple. The first page was a summary of the acquisition agreement. The acquiring party, Oracle America Incorporated. The acquired company, Innovate Next, LLC. The purchase price, $85 million. The deal had closed last Thursday. My team and I had celebrated quietly, sworn to secrecy, by the most terrifying non-disclosure agreement I had ever seen. The terms were brutally clear: no disclosure of any kind to anyone until the official press release from Oracle's Corporate Communications Department, scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday. Any breach would result in catastrophic financial penalties and potential litigation. My supposed bankruptcy. It was a lie, but one rooted in a grain of truth, which made it all the more insidious. As part of the acquisition, Innovate Next, the LLC, was being dissolved, its assets and intellectual property fully absorbed into Oracle's cloud infrastructure division. Jessica's source at the law firm must have caught wind of the corporate dissolution filing, a standard procedural step, and, either through ignorance or malice, twisted it into a narrative of failure. Knowing my sister, it was malice. She had heard what she wanted to hear. A version of events that elevated her and crushed me. She hadn't just stumbled upon a rumor. She had sought it out, polished it like a weapon, and waited for the perfect moment to use it. The family dinner, the pitying toast, the condescending loan offer, it was all theater, designed for maximum humiliation. She wanted to break me, to put me so firmly in her debt, both financially and emotionally, that I would never be her equal again. I took another long swallow of whiskey. The ice in my veins began to thaw, replaced by something hotter and harder. A cold, clear purpose. She thought she was watching me fall. She had no idea I was watching her from the summit. And she had just handed me the map to her greatest vulnerability. I thought about the pictures she had shown, the greedy light in her eyes. The Oakwood house. I downed the rest of the whiskey, the fire spreading through me. The game was no longer about defense. It was about to be about offense. Monday was one of the strangest days of my life. I woke up to a barrage of texts. The apologetic, worried ones from my parents, which I ignored. And the single, infuriating one from Jessica. Hey, I know you're probably angry, but I did it because I love you. The loan offer still stands whenever you're ready to talk. The disingenuousness of it was breathtaking. I deleted it without replying. I spent the day on a series of secure video calls with the Oracle integration team. I was a multimillionaire, secretly mapping out the future of a significant piece of their cloud technology, all while my own family pictured me filling out unemployment forms. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. Every time a VP from California praised my team's architecture, I pictured the look of pity on my mother's face. It was fuel. Around 3 p.m., I took a break. My brain felt fried from hours of technical jargon and corporate strategy. I grabbed my phone, intending to mindlessly scroll through sports news, but my thumb, acting on some masochistic instinct, opened Instagram instead. And there it was. It was a post from Jessica, uploaded just an hour ago. It was a professional, magazine-quality photograph of the Oakwood house, bathed in the golden light of a Texas afternoon. The angle was perfect, making the porch look grand and the oak trees ancient and wise. It looked like the cover of Southern Living. The caption was what sent me over the edge. Manifesting our future. Sparkle's so excited to put in our offer on this beauty this week. After a little family drama over the weekend, it's nice to focus on positive, beautiful things. Can't wait to make this our forever home. Hashtag Dreamhouse, hashtag Austin Real Estate, hashtag Good Vibes Only, hashtag Fowler Forever Home. My blood ran cold. A little family drama. The casual, dismissive way she referenced my public execution. Good vibes only. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy. She had torched my reputation in front of our parents and was now using the ashes to sanctify her own perfect life on social media. I stared at the picture of the house. It was no longer just a house. It was a symbol. It was her prize, her trophy for winning a game I didn't even know we were playing. It was the physical manifestation of her success and, in her mind, my failure. And in that moment, an idea sparked. It wasn't a thought, not at first. It was a feeling, a cold, electrifying jolt of possibility. What if her dream house, her symbol of victory, became the instrument of her downfall? The flicker of what if rapidly coalesced into a plan. It was audacious. It was ruthless. It was perfect. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second-guess. The fury from Sunday night had finally found its target. I scrolled through my contacts, past my mother, my father, my sister. I stopped on a name I hadn't called in over a year. Ethan Vance, Private Realty. I'd met Ethan at a tech gala. He was a shark in a Tom Ford suit, known in Austin for handling discreet, off-market deals for tech executives, athletes, and old money families who valued privacy above all else. He was precisely the kind of weapon I needed. I pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring. Vance. His voice was crisp and efficient. Ethan, it's Rose Reed. From Innovate Next. Rose. Good to hear from you. I've been hearing whispers about you guys. Congratulations, he said, his tone suggesting he knew the whispers weren't about bankruptcy. Thanks, Ethan. The official news isn't out yet, so I appreciate the discretion. Discretion is my business, he said. What can I do for you? I looked at the picture of the Oakwood house still glowing on my computer screen. I have a project for you, I said, my voice steady and cold. It's unconventional. An hour later, I was sitting across from Ethan Vance in a quiet corner of a slick, minimalist coffee shop downtown. He looked exactly as I remembered, sharp suit, expensive watch, and the hyper-alert eyes of a predator that missed nothing. He listened intently as I laid out the mission, his expression unreadable. I kept the story clean and professional. I didn't mention my sister or the family dinner. I simply told him I wanted to acquire a specific property, 1811 Oakwood Avenue, and that the acquisition needed to be completely anonymous. I want to make an all-cash offer through a purchasing entity, I explained. I want to close as fast as humanly possible. And I want the current prospective buyers to have no idea who they're up against. Ethan took a slow sip of his espresso, his eyes narrowing slightly.
He didn't ask why.
A man like Ethan Vance knew that the why was irrelevant. Only the how and the how much mattered. "That's my specialty, Rose," he said, a thin smile playing on his lips. "We'll set up a blind trust. It's a simple process. We'll give it a bland, innocuous name. The Sabinal River Trust. How does that sound?" "Perfect," I said. "An all-cash offer with a 7-day close is a silver bullet," he continued, leaning forward. "It tells the seller you're not just serious, you're inevitable. It eliminates financing contingencies, appraisal issues that's clean. Sellers love clean." He pulled out his phone, his thumbs moving with practice speed. 1811 Oakwood. "Let me see." He was silent for a moment. "Okay. It's been on the market for 12 days. My sources say one offer has already been submitted. Let me make a call." He stood up and walked toward the front of the shop, his voice a low murmur. I watched him, feeling a sense of detached calm. I was no longer the victim of Jessica's ambush. I was a strategist, moving pieces on a board she didn't even know existed. Ethan returned 5 minutes later, sliding back into the booth. "Okay," he said, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. "The offer is from a Mark and Jessica Fowler. It's a strong offer, but it's traditionally financed. They came in just a hair under asking price. My contact says they're confident, acting like they're the only real players at the table. They're expecting to get a counteroffer tomorrow and close the deal by the end of the week." Jessica Fowler. He said the name without a flicker of recognition. To him, she was just the competition. "They're about to have a very bad day," Ethan said with a predatory grin. "What's our number?" I told him the number I wanted to offer. It was substantially over the asking price, enough to make the seller's eyes pop, an offer they couldn't possibly ignore. Ethan whistled softly. "That's not a bid, Rose. That's a coronation. They won't even bother with a counter to the Fowlers. They'll accept this outright." "Good," I said. "Make the offer. Put it in front of them this evening. Consider it done." We stood up and shook hands. His grip was firm, sealing the pact. As I walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright Texas sun, a feeling of cold, electrifying purpose washed over me. The humiliation of Sunday was now the fuel for Saturday. The trap was set. My sister was happily planning the renovation of a house she would never own, blissfully unaware that a ghost was already living in her dream. Monday evening felt like the calm in the eye of a storm I had created. The fury from Sunday had settled into a low, steady hum of purpose. I sat in my silent apartment, the city lights of Austin beginning to sparkle below, a document from the Oracle transition team glowing on one of my monitors. On the other, I had a single, empty notes file open, a blank canvas for the masterpiece of revenge I was painting. My phone rang at precisely 7:15 p.m. It was Ethan. "The offer has been submitted and acknowledged by the seller's agent," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "The Sabinal River Trust is officially in play." "And the reaction?" I asked, keeping my own voice level. A stunned silence, followed by a request to verify funds. Which, of course, we did instantly. They've never seen an offer like this come in on a Monday night. They're rattled in a good way. You've got their full attention. "Good," I said. "Keep me updated." I slept better that night than I had in years. For the first time since Jessica's ambush, I felt a sense of agency. I wasn't the victim of her narrative anymore. I was the author of a new one. The call I was waiting for came on Tuesday afternoon, as I was deep in a workflow analysis. "Rose." Ethan's voice was laced with amusement. "The hornet's nest has been kicked. The sellers informed the Fowlers this morning that a substantially higher, all-cash offer is on the table." I could picture it perfectly. Jessica and Mark, confident and smug, taking the call from their agent. The initial confusion, the dawning horror, the frantic anger. It was a beautiful image. "According to their agent, they're scrambling," Ethan continued. "They just submitted a revised offer. They came up 100,000, waived the appraisal contingency, and shortened their inspection period. They're trying to look as strong as they can. But it's still financed, I stated. It wasn't a question. Still financed, and still $250,000 below our initial bid. It's a desperate move. What are your instructions? This was the moment to establish dominance. To show this wasn't a negotiation, it was an annihilation. Crush it, I said simply. Raise our offer by another 50,000. Don't just beat them, make them feel foolish for even trying. Send it over in the next 10 minutes. A pleasure, Ethan said. This is what we call shock and awe in the business. They won't have a response to this. He was right. An hour later, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Jessica. My heart gave a little thump of vicious satisfaction. Can you believe this? Some insane ghost buyer with more money than sense just came in way over our heads on the house. Who even does that in this market? We're so stressed. I let the message sit there for a full 5 minutes, savoring the panic encoded in her words. Then I typed out a cool, simple reply. That's crazy. I'm sorry, that really stinks. I hit send, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. She thought she was confiding in her poor, broken little sister. She had no idea she was texting the ghost herself. On Wednesday morning, Jessica's follow-up text arrived. We put in another offer. I think this one might do it. Feeling hopeful. By the way, are you free for lunch? My treat. Would be good to see you. The timing was perfect. Her fragile hope was the ideal seasoning for the meal to come. She wanted an audience for her impending victory and a charity case to make her feel better about the financial strain she was clearly under. I was happy to play both roles. We met at a trendy farm-to-table restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the waiters described the life story of the chicken you're about to eat. Jessica was already there when I arrived, seated at a prime table on the patio. She looked impeccable, as always, but I could see the subtle signs of stress she couldn't hide with concealer. The faint tension in her jaw, the way she tapped her finger impatiently on her water glass. Rose. There you are, she chirped, standing to give me an air kiss next to each cheek. So good to see you out of the house. I gave her a small, weary smile. Thanks for inviting me. The conversation, steered by her, was a masterclass in condescension. She lamented the stress of the bidding war, framing it as a high-class problem. Honestly, it's just vulgar, she said, swirling a ridiculously expensive Pinot Grigio. This anonymous buyer, throwing money around like it's nothing. There's no finesse to it. Mark thinks it's probably some tech bro who just sold his Bitcoin. New money, you know? She wrinkled her nose. I just nodded, taking a bite of my salad. It sounds stressful. It is, she sighed dramatically. But we're so close. Our agent says our latest offer is really compelling. We're showing how serious we are, how much we love the house. Sometimes it's not about the money, you know? It's about the passion. I nearly choked on a piece of lettuce. The passion. She was trying to convince herself that her desire for the house was a currency the universe would accept. Then came the pivot. Having established her own drama, it was time to attend to the less fortunate. But enough about me, she said, placing her hand on mine in a gesture of profound sympathy. How are you really holding up? Mark and I were talking, and he said he'd be happy to look over your resume. His firm isn't really hiring, but he could pass it along to some people. Maybe something in project management? A little less pressure, you know? The offer hung in the air, a stink bomb of pity. She was already rewriting my future, a safe, boring, mid-level corporate drone, forever in the shadow of her grand life in her Terrytown dream house. And listen, she continued, leaning in conspiratorially. There is no shame in moving back home for a bit. Mom and Dad would love it. Just until you get back on your feet. I looked at her, at the genuine, if misguided, concern now mixing with the superiority in her eyes. She truly believed this narrative. She saw me as a project, a broken bird she could nurse back to a state of acceptable mediocrity. I'll think about it, I said, my voice quiet. Thanks, Jess. She beamed, her magnanimity affirmed. Of course. That's what big sisters are for. She insisted on paying the bill, making a grand gesture of handing her Amex Black card to the waiter. As she signed the slip, I watched her, a cold wave of certainty washing over me. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about dismantling the entire condescending, suffocating architecture of her perception of me. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. Thursday was a day of silence. It was a calculated move suggested by Ethan. Let them sit with it, he'd said. Let them think their last offer is actually being considered. Let them hope. It'll make the final blow more effective. The silence was excruciating for them, I imagined. For me, it was a quiet, thrumming anticipation. I worked, I ate, I went to the gym. I went through all the motions of a normal life, all while a secret war was being waged from my laptop. The call from Ethan came on Thursday evening, right on schedule. They're getting nervous, he reported, the satisfaction evident in his voice. The seller's agent called me. The Fowlers are asking for an update. They want to know if their offer is going to be accepted. And what did you say? I said my client is performing their final due diligence and will give a definitive answer by tomorrow. I've pushed the sellers to set a best and final deadline for 5 p.m. tomorrow. This is it, Rose. The final act. A shiver of excitement went down my spine. They'll have to liquidate everything to make their final number, I mused. Oh, absolutely, Ethan confirmed. They'll be stretching every dollar, cashing out retirement funds, calling in favors. They're going to put their absolute maximum on the table tomorrow, believing it's the one punch that will finally knock out the ghost. Friday was a blur. I could barely focus on my work with Oracle. My mind was on the 5 p.m. deadline. I pictured Jessica and Mark at their bank, signing papers, moving money, their faces a mixture of terror and exhilarating hope. I imagined the tense conversations, the second-guessing, the final, unified decision to go all in. At 4:30 p.m., Ethan called. We have their number. They came in hot. It's a very, very strong offer. They even included a heartfelt letter to the sellers. I laughed out loud. A letter? That was so quintessentially Jessica. They're fighting with passion, I said, mocking her words from lunch. Passion doesn't sign the closing documents, Ethan retorted dryly. What's our move? I waited. I let the minutes tick by. 4:40, 4:45, 4:50. I wanted our offer to be the last thing the sellers saw before the deadline expired. I wanted it to be an undeniable, final word. Okay, I said at 4:52 p.m. Here's the number. I gave him a figure that I knew would eclipse theirs by a psychologically crushing margin, not so much as to seem insane, but enough to make their maximum effort look inadequate. And Ethan, I added, there's one more condition. I'm listening. We want to close. Tomorrow morning. Tell them we can be at the title office at 10 a.m., wire sent, ready to sign. No delays. Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he let out a low whistle. You're not just buying a house, Rose. You're making a statement. This is the kill shot. I'll draft it now. I hung up the phone. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a surge of pure adrenaline. The final offer was in the air. The trap, a week in the making, was about to spring. The call came at 6:15 p.m. on Friday. I was standing at my window, watching the traffic flow on the streets below, when Ethan's name flashed on my screen. I answered before the first ring finished. They accepted, he said. There was no preamble. Unconditionally. They didn't even think about it. The Fowlers are out. The house is yours. Closing is confirmed for 10 a.m. tomorrow. A wave of something vast and powerful washed over me. It was triumph, cold and pure. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. The pleasure was all mine, Rose, he said. I'll see you at the title office. I woke up on Saturday morning before the sun. I made coffee and stood on my small balcony, watching the sky over the city slowly fade from inky black to bruised purple and then to a brilliant, fiery orange. It felt like the dawn of a new era in my life. I was no longer Rose, the struggling tech founder. I was no longer Jessica's charity case. I was the ghost. I was the storm. The title office was a hypermodern, sterile space of glass and brushed steel in a downtown high-rise. It smelled of expensive paper and ambition. A polite, efficient woman named Patricia led me to a large boardroom with a view of the Texas state capitol. She was the closing agent, and she knew me only as the designated signatory for the Sabinal River Trust. The table was covered in a mountain of documents, each one requiring a signature or an initial. For the next hour, I sat there, the only sound in the room the whisper of paper and the smooth, authoritative scratch of my pen. I signed away millions of dollars with a calm detachment that surprised even me. The wire transfer, the culmination of 5 years of relentless work and 1 week of calculated revenge, was authorized with a simple click on a secure portal. Finally, Patricia squared up the last stack of papers and smiled. Everything appears to be in order. The funds have been received and verified. She slid a small manila envelope across the polished mahogany table. Congratulations, Ms. Reed. The property is now owned by the trust. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 freshly cut keys attached to a simple paper tag with the address, 1811 Oakwood Avenue, written on it. I picked them up. They were cool and solid in my palm, heavier than I expected. They were the keys to my sister's dream house. They were the keys to my new life. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I pulled out my phone. The news of Oracle's acquisition of InnovateNext was still a closely guarded secret, a ticking time bomb set to go off in less than 36 hours. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. I had the house. I had the secret. Now all I needed was an audience. I spent Saturday afternoon in a state of quiet, victorious solitude. The urge to drive to the house, to walk through the empty rooms and stand on the porch, was immense. But I resisted. The reveal had to be perfect. The first time I stepped across that threshold, I wanted my family there to witness it. Specifically, I wanted Jessica to witness it. That evening, I ordered my favorite Thai food, opened a bottle of brutally expensive champagne I'd been saving for the acquisition, and sat on my couch. The bubbles fizzed on my tongue, a physical manifestation of the effervescent triumph coursing through my veins. The planning was over. The execution was complete. Now for the performance. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. It was a minefield of my mother's worried check-ins and Jessica's posts about her fabulous life, a digital monument to my family's skewed reality. I scrolled past a photo of Jessica's dog in a new sweater and a well-meaning but clueless "thinking of you" from my dad. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The message had to be perfect, vague enough to be cryptic, but pathetic enough to fit their narrative. It needed to sound like a cry for help. I typed it out, read it, deleted it, and typed it again. Finally, I settled on the right words. Family meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. It's important. I'll text the address in the morning. Please be there. I took a deep breath and hit send. The words sat there in the chat, stark and vulnerable. The 3 little dots indicating someone was typing appeared almost instantly. It was my mother, of course. "We'll be there, honey. Whatever you need." But it was the message that came a moment later, in a private text directly to me, that made my lips curl into a smile. It was from Jessica. "Don't worry, Rose. We'll be there to support you." The condescension was so thick, I could feel it radiating through the screen. She thought I was finally surrendering, finally ready to accept her pity and her loans. She thought she was on her way to a rescue mission. I took another sip of champagne, the taste sharp and sweet. The bait was taken. The audience was confirmed. The stage was set for the final, glorious act. On Sunday, I arrived at the Oakwood house an hour before the scheduled meeting. The key felt solid and real in my hand as I slid it into the old lock. It turned with a satisfying, resonant click. The air inside was still and cool, smelling faintly of old wood, beeswax, and possibility. Sunlight streamed through the large, multi-paned windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the empty living room. This was it. My house. My victory. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. I ran my hand along the smooth, carved mantelpiece and pictured it decorated for Christmas. I stood in the space where Jessica had dreamed of putting a chef's kitchen and imagined my own simple, elegant design instead. This was my quiet moment, a personal claiming of the space before the storm arrived. In the dining room, I unpacked a small bag I'd brought, setting a single, chilled bottle of Veuve Clicquot and 5 champagne flutes on the floor in the corner, a silent testament to a celebration I knew was coming. Then, at 1:45 p.m., I stood by the front window and sent the text with the address to the family group chat. And I waited. As the minutes ticked by, I closed my eyes and pictured their car, a silver Lexus SUV, making its way from Westlake Hills toward Tarrytown. I could almost hear the conversation inside, a symphony of their misguided assumptions. My mother would be wringing her hands in the passenger seat. "I just hope she's okay, Richard." She sounded so final in that text. My father, gripping the steering wheel, would be stern and disappointed. "She's made her bed, Carol. Now she has to deal with the consequences. Let's just hope this isn't as bad as it sounds." But the real performance would be in the back seat. I could see Jessica, phone in hand, sighing with theatrical impatience. "Honestly, I have a million things to do today."
This is so dramatic.
She could have just called. Mark would chuckle, patting her knee. "Be nice, honey. She's probably embarrassed. It's hard to admit you failed so spectacularly. I just hope she's not going to ask for an outrageous amount of money. People in her situation can be so unrealistic." "I told her we'd help," Jessica would say, her voice taking on the tone of a saint. "We'll co-sign for a little apartment for her in a cheaper neighborhood. Get her back on her feet. It's the least we can do." I opened my eyes, a cold smile touching my lips. Their condescension was a poison they had been administering for years. Today, they would finally drink it themselves. I pictured the moment the GPS voice would instruct them to turn onto Oakwood Avenue. The confusion. "That can't be right," my father would mutter, recognizing the prestigious street. Then, the final instruction. "Your destination is on the right. 1811 Oakwood Avenue." I imagined the silence in the car as they pulled up. The slow, creeping horror on Jessica's face as she recognized the stone facade, the porch swing, the sprawling live oak trees. The house she had lost. Her dream house. Her forever home. She would look from the house to the figure standing calmly on the porch, waiting for them.
Me.
The cognitive dissonance must have been deafening. The silver Lexus pulled into the driveway so slowly it was almost comical, as if the driver were hoping the house was a mirage that would evaporate upon approach. The doors opened, but for a long moment no one got out. They just stared. My parents looked utterly bewildered, their faces a canvas of confusion. Mark looked suspicious, his lawyer's brain trying to process a scenario that had no logical precedent. And Jessica, her face was pale, her perfectly applied lipstick a slash of red in a sea of shock. Finally, they emerged from the car and walked toward me, their steps hesitant on the flagstone path. They stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at me as if I were an alien who had just landed. Jessica found her voice first. It was sharp, brittle. "Rose, what is this? What in the world are we doing here? This isn't funny." "Funny?" I asked, my voice serene. I let a small, calm smile touch my lips as I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys. I let them jingle, a sound as clear and final as a bell tolling. "I'm not laughing. This is the house," she stammered, stating the obvious. "The one Mark and I were trying to buy. The one some jerk bought out from under us." "I know," I said softly. Ignoring her, I turned my attention to my parents. "Mom, Dad."
Mark.
"Welcome. I'm glad you could make it." With a smooth, deliberate motion, I turned, slid a key into the lock of the heavy oak door, and opened it wide. The empty foyer beckoned. "Please," I said, gesturing them inside. "Come in." They hesitated, but then my father, ever the pragmatist, seemed to decide that answers lay inside, not out on the lawn. He led the way, my mother following close behind. Mark went next, his eyes scanning every detail, searching for clues. Jessica was the last to enter, her movements stiff with outrage and disbelief. "I don't understand," she hissed, her voice low and furious as they stood clustered in the foyer. Are you house-sitting? Did you get a job with the people who bought it? Did you break in? Because if this is some kind of pathetic, twisted attempt to get back at me, Rose, it's sick. I let her accusations hang in the air, letting the weight of them settle. I let her spin her theories, each one more desperate than the last. I wanted her to exhaust every possible explanation within her reality before I shattered it completely. I closed the front door, the sound echoing in the quiet house. Then I turned to face them, my serene smile still in place. House-sitting? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Breaking in? Jessica, why would I do any of that? I paused, letting my gaze drift from her to my parents, and then back to her. I delivered the final line with a quiet, devastating simplicity. Welcome to my new house. The four of them stared at me, as if I had just announced I could fly. My mother's hand went to her throat. My father just shook his head slowly, as if trying to clear water from his ears. It was Jessica who broke the silence, a harsh, grating laugh bursting from her lips. Your house? Oh, Rose, that's rich. Don't be ridiculous. You're bankrupt. We were literally about to offer you a loan to keep you from being homeless. That was it. The line I had been waiting to hear all week. The thesis statement of her entire campaign of humiliation. The serene mask I had worn all day finally dropped. My smile faded, replaced by a gaze as cold and hard as steel. I took a step toward her. The loan you were going to offer me? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You mean the one you so generously announced in front of the whole family last Sunday? The one you offered right after you told them all I was filing for bankruptcy? That loan. Jessica flinched as if I'd slapped her. Mark, recovering his composure, stepped forward, taking on the role of the rational inquisitor. Rose, this is a multi-million-dollar property. Just tell us what's going on. Where did you get this kind of money? As if on cue, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A preset alarm set for 2:15 p.m. Central Time. In New York, the stock market had been open for 15 minutes. I pulled out my phone, my movements calm and deliberate. Funny you should ask, I said, looking not at them, but at my screen. The timing is just about right. My fingers moved quickly. I opened a web browser, my thumb tapping a bookmark I had created days ago. The page loaded instantly. I turned the phone around, the screen glowing in the dim light of the foyer. The headline was big, bold, and undeniable. It was from the Wall Street Journal's website, published just minutes ago. Oracle acquires Austin-based InnovateNext in landmark $85 million deal to bolster cloud infrastructure. I held the phone there, letting them read it. I watched their eyes scan the words, watched them process the headline, the company name, the unbelievable number. I saw the exact moment the blood drained from my father's face, the moment my mother's eyes filled with tears of a very different kind. But I wasn't finished. I lowered the phone and looked directly at Jessica, whose face had crumpled into a mask of utter disbelief. You are wondering about the ghost buyer, Jessica? I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. The insane jerk with more money than sense. You were bidding against the Sabinal River Trust. I paused, letting her connect the dots. That was me. Every time you and Mark scraped together another 100,000, every time you waived another contingency, every time you wrote another heartfelt letter, you were bidding against me. I let the full weight of the truth land. I hadn't just succeeded. I had used the very symbol of her own aspirations, the house she had publicly coveted, as the instrument of her unmasking. Her dream house was now the monument to my triumph and her spectacular, humiliating defeat. The silence that followed the full revelation was heavier, deeper than any that had come before. It was a silence filled with the deafening sound of a world being irrevocably upended. My parents were the first to break. My father sank onto the bottom step of the grand staircase, looking not at me, but at the floor, as if the shame were a physical weight pushing him down. My mother just whispered my name. Oh, Rose, her voice thick with a cocktail of awe, relief, and profound regret. The disappointment I had seen in her eyes last Sunday was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of realizing how little faith she'd had and how cruel she had allowed her other daughter to be. Mark was a statue carved from chalk. As a lawyer whose entire world revolved around power, status, and money, he understood the calculus instantly. The family hierarchy had just been dynamited and reformed, and he was standing on the wrong side of the chasm. He had married the sister who was supposed to be the success story, and in the space of 30 seconds, she had become the family fool. He just stared at me, his smug smirk finally, blessedly, wiped from his face. And then there was Jessica. Her collapse came in stages. First, denial.
No.
No, it's a fake article. It's a prank. You're lying.
Then rage.
Her face contorted, turning a blotchy red. How could you? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the empty house. How could you be so cruel, so vindictive? To dangle my dream house in front of me? To torture us all week? You're a monster. Finally, the pathetic, pleading tears of a narcissist whose supply had been cut off. But this was my house, she sobbed, her words devolving into incoherent blubbering. It was my dream. I had plans. You stole my dream. I watched her, feeling nothing but a vast, cold distance. The hurt she had inflicted had finally calcified into something unbreakable. I was done. I walked over to her, stopping just a few feet away. I spoke, and my voice was not triumphant or angry. It was just quiet. Final. I didn't steal your dream, Jessica. I bought a house. My house. The dream was just a story you told yourself, a prize you thought you deserved. You stood at Mom and Dad's table, and you tried to destroy me. You didn't do it to help me. You did it to humiliate me. To make sure I knew that you were the winner, and I was the loser. You enjoyed it. I let that hang in the air. The only difference between us, I continued, is that my humiliation of you is built on truth. Yours was built on a lie. I turned my back on her tears and looked at the four of them, my family, standing as trespassers in my foyer. The meeting is over, I said. My voice was level, absolute. I'd like you to leave now. Jessica just stared at me, her mouth agape. I clarified, my voice dropping to an icy command she couldn't possibly misinterpret. Get out of my house. 3 weeks later, I was sitting on a brand new porch swing, the one I had picked out myself, on the front porch of the Oakwood house. The afternoon was warm, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak tree on the lawn. The house was no longer empty. It was filled with the beginnings of my life. Boxes were still stacked in some rooms, but my favorite armchair was in the living room, my books were on the shelves, and the smell of fresh coffee from my own machine filled the air. It was peaceful. The aftermath of that Sunday had been a quiet earthquake. There had been no more texts from Jessica or Mark. It was as if a door had been slammed shut and locked between us, and the silence on the other side was the most profound relief I had ever known. The toxic limb had been amputated. My parents had called 2 days later. It was a long, difficult, tearful conversation. My father, for the first time in my life, apologized without reservation. He apologized for doubting me, for his disappointment, and for not seeing Jessica's cruelty for what it was. My mother's apology was simpler, choked with sobs. I'm so sorry, baby. I should have protected you. The relationship was not.
And that's the end of the story.
Thank you all so much for following along on Rose's journey from humiliation to victory. Now I have to know what you think. After everything that happened, what should Rose do next when it comes to her sister, Jessica? I want to see a vote in the comments. You have to choose one. Comment #TeamForgive if you believe Rose should eventually try to mend things with her sister, because family is family.
Or
comment #TeamRevenge if you think Jessica got exactly what she deserved and Rose should cut her off for good. I can't wait to see which team wins in the comments below. Thanks for reading.